I was a bit sceptical about going back to Monaco for this season, as I'm a bit on the fence as to whether it's a good place for racing or not. However, going back to the Principality after a year off has made me realise that actually it's amazing to see these F1 cars going around the street circuit, and the Saturday qualifying is one of the best on the calendar. The race was a tactical one, as it always is in Monaco, but I would say that it was quite an exciting one as well. There's a lot to talk about, so here's my 5 things we learned from the Monaco Grand Prix. Let's have a look. My name's Andy, and this is Behind the Drive. Ferrari shoot themselves in the foot. I think the first point in this video has got to be a red box for Ferrari. All season long they've been strong in the slow speed corners, but not many people, myself included, expected the Italian team to be good enough to compete with the Red Bull and Mercedes cars this weekend. But I was proven wrong, as Charles Leclerc managed to put his car on pole position on Saturday afternoon. Although this itself was not without controversy, as he hit the barrier at the swimming pool section. Some people thought that it was a purposeful mistake, with the Monegasque driver preventing Carlos Sainz, Valtteri Bottas and Max Verstappen from completing their final timed runs in Q3, stopping any chance of them taking that home pole position away from Leclerc. But if you think that he would do that to stop the other drivers, and at the same time risk his own car and cause the mechanics a tough overnight repair, then quite frankly you're a fool. And it was proven in the end, as Leclerc identified an issue on his reconnaissance lap with no time to repair the car. It was ultimately a risk too far for the prancing horses, as they clearly expected too much of the gearbox and drive shaft and didn't identify the damage that had been done to the car despite multiple checks on both Saturday and Sunday. Let's face it, a 6th place start on the grid after a 5th place penalty is better than not starting at all. And the curse of the Monaco Grand Prix continues for Leclerc, as he's still never finished his home race in any of the races that he's completed in, even through his junior categories. The issue cost him being able to compete, and any opportunity to score some solid points for the team this weekend were gone. And I think that this is what will hurt the team the most, as they had a real opportunity to take the battle to McLaren in 3rd in the championship this weekend, as this is one of the few circuits on the calendar that will really suit them. And with Daniel Ricciardo out of position in P12 on the grid, it was really meant to be 2v1 between these two teams. In the end, it was really Sainz versus Norris, as they ran 3rd and 4th respectively in the early stages and came home 2nd and 3rd after Bottas retired. It means that McLaren still lead Ferrari by just 2 points in the Constructors' Championship. I think that the key point that I took from this though was that Ferrari remain that bit behind Red Bull and Mercedes in terms of their mechanics and strategists. It's not the first time that Ferrari have lost out in a situation like this over recent years, and it probably won't be the last. It just feels like if this situation had happened to Red Bull or Mercedes, they would have identified the issue before the start of the Grand Prix. It's impossible to know for sure, and I'm not saying that it's an easy thing to do by any means given the complex nature of these cars, but the Ferrari team cost themselves a huge haul of points this weekend from Leclerc. Instead, they did get a huge haul of points from Carlos Sainz as he took his first podium for the Scuderia in Monaco. Sainz drove a quiet race where he never really looked threatened by Norris behind and never really looked to be threatening Bottas or Verstappen ahead of him. So a steady race to bring home a podium finish. And I think he'll be happy with that result, although he will still be disappointed after he was convinced he could have taken that pole position yesterday if it wasn't for his teammate's mistake. It still represents a great rebound for the team as they continue their recovery after a disappointing 2020 season. For Sainz, he continues to be the strongest of all the transferred drivers, and to be at the pace of Leclerc so quickly shows just how good of a driver he really is, and I'm massively impressed once again. However, despite this podium finish for Sainz, I still feel like Ferrari shot themselves in the foot this weekend by not just cutting their losses and investigating the damage on Leclerc's car thoroughly enough. A poor weekend for Mercedes. Lewis Hamilton and Mercedes have had a rare off weekend. A 7th place qualifying position for Hamilton was poor, while his main championship rival in Max Verstappen took 2nd and his teammate Valtteri Bottas managed 3rd. Sure, the Mercedes car is not designed for Monaco and it isn't really suited for the circuit at all, but to be that far off his teammate in particular is disappointing to say the least. He was fortunate to run in 6th after Leclerc's issue, but really being out of position on Saturday often results in a disappointing weekend here, which we saw as he ended up all the way down in 7th, despite Bottas retiring from the race. So it needs to be a red box for Mercedes this weekend after such a disappointing display. From a fan's perspective, it was great to see the championship fight close up, as it was Verstappen and Red Bull who were out at the front of the race, a point that we'll look at later on. but it went from bad to worse for Hamilton, who went for the undercut on Gasly and ultimately ended up behind Vettel, Gasly and Perez as well after the Aston Martin and Red Bull drivers went longer on their soft compound tyres in the first stint. It was a dreadful display from Mercedes as their strategy just didn't work at all. It means that in the championship, it's now Max Verstappen that leads the way with 105 points, and Hamilton's now 4 points behind. It then went from bad to worse for the team though, after a cross-threaded wheel nut on the front right of Valtteri Bottas's car meant he had to retire from the race. Ironically, if Hamilton had pitted second, he could have been forced to go long with Bottas stuck in the pit box, which could have brought him up the order. But I think most of us were gutted for Bottas after a really strong weekend, in which he looked like he could have been an easy P2 had everything gone to plan. Seeing a wheel get stuck on like that is a very rare sight, but I'm sure the Mercedes team will go back to the drawing board to ensure they could avoid this happening again. It was Bottas' second retirement of the season, which is a real shame for the Finnish driver, as this race was a great opportunity for him to prove his worth in that second Mercedes seat. But overall, it was the worst weekend of the season so far for Mercedes. Norris takes another podium, breaking the livery curse. After a somewhat disappointing 8th place finish in Spain where he was beaten by his teammate, Lando Norris really turned things round in Monaco, with a solid qualifying to get to P5, which of course became a P4. And he then drove a solid race once again to take his McLaren car to 3rd in the end, after gaining another position from the Mercedes pit stop blunder. It has to be a green box for Norris once again this season, as he continues to show why he's perhaps the most informed driver of them all at the moment. It was mostly a comfortable race for the young Brit, as he took his second podium finish of the season. Early on he did get a black and white flag for track limits, but once he got that warning he was faultless for the rest of the afternoon. And even with a complete lack of grip on his hard compound tyres in the second stint, he managed to keep the rapid Red Bull driver of Perez behind him, and did the defensive drive of his life to hang on to that final podium spot, although admittedly it's pretty easy to do that around Monaco. It coincided with McLaren's one-off livery change for this weekend, where they painted the car in the Gulf colours, which looked absolutely incredible and was a refreshing change to see the team try something different. And for Norris, at least he made sure that the curse of the one-off livery that's been seen in the last couple of years with Mercedes in 2019 and Ferrari in 2020 did not repeat itself again for McLaren, as Norris continued to be there to fight for the team and keep their 3rd place spot in the championship once again. He's been there on 2 occasions now this season to take advantage when Mercedes and Red Bull falter and benefit from the chaotic races. It shows his maturity and improvement that he's made this season, as he now sits 3rd in the championship once again. Red Bull's cool, calm and collected strategy. Once Leclerc wasn't taking part in the race this afternoon, it was really Red Bull's and Max Verstappen's race to lose. And it wasn't just with Max Verstappen that Red Bull did well, as Sergio Perez maximised his strategy to make his way up the order, adding even more pressure to Mercedes in the Constructors' Championship. So it's absolutely a green box for Red Bull this weekend. Verstappen did well all round, and could well have put his car on pole if he'd have been able to complete his second run. And he did well off the line after a lot of wheel spin to keep ahead of Valtteri Bottas. From that point though, it was pretty much plain sailing for the Dutchman, as he drove a safe race managing the pace well in his first stint, which ensured there were no gaps building up later down the order through the top 10 or so. It was this move that meant nobody could take advantage of the undercut on Verstappen, and he was always going to be the winner this afternoon. For the first time in his career, he's leading the World Championship, and he said that this season he's going to be managing risks and trying to consolidate his points when things go wrong for the team. This weekend though, he did everything that was asked of him, and cruised to a comfortable victory. I think he's improved so much as a driver over the years, particularly at Monaco, where early on in his career he made so many mistakes that cost him dearly. But now he's ready for the championship fight. For Perez, after a tough qualifying session where he could only qualify 9th, he had a great afternoon on Sunday. He looked down and out at the circuit where it's near enough impossible to make an overtake, but he went long on the first stint and was even at one point leading the race. In the end, he leapfrogged Vettel, Gasly and Lewis Hamilton and got ahead of Leclerc and Bottas through their respective retirements. It meant he was able to take 4th position, well ahead of both Mercedes cars. And it meant that the Red Bull team also did well enough to take 37 points compared to Mercedes' 7. So a huge swing in both championships, as they now lead both. A great result for the team, proving that they're capable of competing with Mercedes throughout this season. And the championship fight is well and truly on. Vettel scores his first points for Aston Martin. The final discussion point that I want to look at is Sebastian Vettel's stellar drive to 5th place in the Aston Martin. His first points for the team, and it was a solid haul of 10 points, as the German driver made up 3 places through the Grand Prix. It was the move through the pits where he went on for an extra couple of laps compared to Hamilton and Gasly, which allowed him to leapfrog them both through the pits. A great drive on a track where you need to be on form, and it represents perhaps the start of the team's recovery after a disappointing start to the season. So it's a green box for Aston Martin this weekend. And for me, this shows Vettel's experience, as he managed to make sure that he put his Aston Martin car as far up the order as he could. It wasn't the team's only points though, as Lance Stroll took 8th position for 4 points, while making the counter strategy work, starting on the hard compound tyres. So the team as a whole almost quadrupled their points tally for this season. It was a great outcome for the team, but really in my opinion, probably a bit artificial, as their car's a real challenge at the more traditional circuits. But it represents a great step in the right direction for the Silverstone-based team, as they move ahead of both Alpine and AlphaTauri in the championship. It'll be interesting to see how they get on at the next race in Baku, which is a bit more of a traditional track compared to Monaco, but is still very much a street circuit. Honourable mentions. The first honourable mention has got to go to the TV director, and if it wasn't for the other action that was happening in this race, they would have absolutely received a red box from me. There isn't much overtaking at Monaco at the best of times, but it still feels like we're waiting to see Vettel's overtake on Gasly as he exited the pits. So the TV directors had a pretty dreadful showing for the world feed. And then also, I want to give a shout out to Antonio Giovinazzi, who took his first points of the season and the first for Alfa Romeo after an impressive qualifying on Saturday afternoon to get into Q3. And then the final honourable mention has got to go to Pierre Gasly, who managed to qualify in 6th and stay there through the race. A truly impressive showing in an AlphaTauri, particularly when compared to his teammate. So those are the 5 things we learned for the 2021 Monaco Grand Prix. What did you learn? And what did I miss? Let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed this video and watched this far, then please leave it a like and hit the subscribe button for more of these videos from every race of this season.